Good day, good night, good anything in between. My name is Cornelia Grace, and I'm here with my co host Charlotte, and together we are Literary Ramblings. And this month, we are just kind of doing an extra podcast because we haven't finished reading a book together for this month yet, but that will be coming next month. So for January, we are reading Papillon. I think that's how you pronounce it.
You're the one who took French in high school, so.
Listen, it's helpful. It's been a little helpful reading the book, but clearly I did not really learn French. I did learn some pronunciation.
See,
So
in my head I was saying papillion, but I know that can't be it.
yeah, there's no I. I kept putting an I in it too, and there is not a second I.
No.
So I've been saying Papillon in my head, and if nothing else, if there is a cool French pronunciation of that, I'm just doing the bastardized, Americanized way of saying French words, and I feel like people will forgive me for that, hopefully.
Please comment if you know the actual pronunciation. Thank you.
Yeah. So for this podcast for January, just so you guys have something to listen to, because I know there's so many people who listen to us talk, we're just gonna do a short one about our reading goals and kind of our reading thoughts for 2022. I am super into making New Year resolutions. I've been doing it for a while, and I think for me personally, it just really, really helps me to have some ideas of what I want to do. And it's taken 4 or 5 years for me to really figure out the best way to make my resolutions. And it's been some trial and error, but at this point, I feel like I have a pretty good idea of what kind of resolutions to make and how much I can get done in a year's time. So this year, I actually have a few more goals than I normally would have, but a lot of them are like interconnected. Some of them are connected to this podcast and like reading regularly and getting some writing done as well. So hopefully I can accomplish those. But I really love making resolutions. I always have at least one blog post about it at the end of the year, and I usually have more than one because I'll typically do like a resolution roundup to like say like what I got done in the year, and then I'll do a resolutions post, and then sometimes I'll do another post about them too. Charlotte
Yeah.
doesn't do that because
No,
she's a
no.
well-adjusted and stable human being who doesn't have to make general to-do lists for her to get anything done.
I don't know if I would go that far, but I definitely tend not to write out solid goals at the beginning of the year. I do generally have an idea of like things I do want to accomplish over the course of the year, but I don't normally make a list and I'm not super strict about it. So it just ends up being a kind of more evolutionary thing. Because I feel like sometimes at the end of the year, I will look, or like towards the end of the year, I'll be like, oh, wait, I still want to do this couple like things. So I more do it as I go, I guess, is what I'm saying. I don't start at the year with like, this is going to be the tone of the entire year, you know?
Yeah, no, I absolutely get that. I started writing them all out, and I never do more than like a dozen goals for the year because I find it overwhelming.
Yeah.
But I guess I do kind of set the tone for my year, and
Hmm.
usually I want to just try to be productive. But I have gone like back and forth on a lot of goals. Some of my goals have been the same for 3 or 4 years, actually. And I just keep putting them on the list because I'm like, you know what? Maybe this year they'll work out and maybe they won't. I have absolutely gotten way more gracious with myself over time to
Oh, for
like
sure.
figure out that I would often start my lists off with things that were like way too much, and I was just being really, really ambitious. And then, you get to the end of the year and you're like, wow, I didn't do any of that because it was overwhelming just to even think about doing it.
Yep.
And honestly, some people's reading goals give me that much anxiety. I don't set high reading goals to kind of transition into the topic a little
The
bit.
actual topic at hand.
Yeah. Well, one of my friends last year, her reading goal was 100 books. And I was like, oh my gosh,
A ton.
I'm such a failure. I can't read
Is
that
she
many books in a year.
is
Oh,
she a listener of books as well though?
yes. Yes,
Because I feel
she
like
listens
that
to
speeds it
audiobooks.
up a lot.
Yeah, I think I absolutely agree because I have actually read 4 books this year. And I put read in quotations, but I do think that audiobooks are just as much reading as reading a physical book or reading digitally. No shade here. I do both. I do all
Yeah.
three. So it all works. But I mean, I have already like read 4 books this year, and it's only the ninth as of that we are recording this on. And I read
Impressive.
all 4 of those books by listening to them.
See,
So
and
went really fast.
I I can't do it. I mean, I could on my commute maybe, but I don't love it because I'm a very intense listener. Like when I listen to music, I'm not doing anything else. It's very hard for me to multitask with any kind of background noise,
Mm,
and it's just not very productive for me to listen to a book because I feel like I want to be doing something. It's hard for me to just like sit and listen to something.
hmm
So, but that's what
But
I
then
have
it's
to
hard to
do.
not to.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. So like the times I could maybe listen to something are when I'm cooking, but only during the non-intense parts of cooking, like the parts that don't require focus,
hmm
and when I'm driving, and that's about it. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I have a decent commute. So does my friend who has had the 100 book goal last year. We both do a decent amount of driving around the area. So that's what I started doing. I listened to the books mostly in the car,
and you
actually.
listen on your phone or
Yes. Listen, my car is very old, but it has a relatively new radio, and I don't know how to use it. I feel like a grandma when I stare at this thing. I'm like, it's like multicolored. It like cycles through different like rainbow colors, and I'm just like, I have no idea. You're supposed to be able to Bluetooth it, but it's still synced with the previous owner's
oh, of course.
iPod, and I'm just like, you had an iPod?
Mm,
I don't think
yep.
I've heard of anyone having an iPod in a little while. I know people still have them. Maybe that's
Yeah, I think the
new
iPhone
build.
has pretty much usurped that, but
Yeah. So I would like to be able to Bluetooth, but as of right now, I just plug my phone in to charge it, and then I just put it on full volume, and it's fine.
yeah.
So I mean, I can still hear it just fine in the car, unless it's like pouring rain, and then it's kind of difficult. But
See, because that's the other thing. Like, I would listen to books on CD, but I do not have space on my phone for even an app right now, currently.
oh, really?
My phone is so full of pictures and videos that there's no room for anything.
Wow.
So,
Need to clean house or like
that's the life I
move
live.
move some stuff to the cloud,
I'm
which is
trying so
just
hard. I
which is
can't
just
do it. I
code.
can't not mass delete photos. So, it's just,
Yeah.
they just live there.
I mean, I predominantly use Google Photos, and honestly, now that they've limited it, I don't keep I keep so few pictures now.
No.
I'm just like, no, because I don't want to take up all my storage space, and I don't want to pay for it either. So
Sad.
whatever. So
So, what
what is?
is.
Hang on.
Ah,
What?
jinx. You can go.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. What is your reading goal this year?
So my reading goal, I'm keeping it the same, is 24, which is 2 books a month. I feel like 2 to 3 books a month is probably reasonable, but there's always some months where I somehow only read a single book. So
Yep.
uh, I got to allow for that.
Well, last year I set a goal publicly, like on my blog, that I wanted to read 12 books. And I knew that I would be able to make that because I was in 2 book clubs
Hmm.
that each read a book a month for at least 10 months of the year. And then I ended up reading 25 books, which was actually very close to my mid goal because my ideal number of books to read last year was 30. Because I was like, that seems like a goal that would be a little outside of the norm. So
Yeah.
I basically like set last year I set 3 goals for myself, which was my minimum goal was 12, my maximum goal was 30, but then like right in the middle at 24 was where it was like that's like my stretch goal.
Yeah.
or somewhere in between.
But you
And I
made
found
it.
that like really, really worked for me, where I had like a minimum number of books that I wanted to read. Like I didn't want to read fewer than 12. Like
Yeah.
that was the like minimum number. But then I wasn't sure if I could make it to 30, so I
Mhm.
didn't want to have to like push myself super hard to get there. So I was
Yeah.
like, okay, we'll settle on 24. So that is essentially what I'm doing this year too, is that I'm pretty sure that I will read at least 24 books, but my minimum goal is still 12, so at least one book a month, and then I'm hoping to read 30. And I feel a little bit more hopeful about that than I probably should, because I usually read more books at the beginning of the year.
Me
So
too.
like I've already read 4 books this year, but I'm like, don't get too cocky, because once the rest of the year hits, I might there will be times that besides like specifically the books for a book club, I am not reading anything.
Yeah.
And even then, like sometimes it is a struggle to get through book club books.
Yep.
Like last year I had 2 books that I didn't finish, and they were both book club picks. So it's kind of like I guess I could have read 27 books, but I didn't because I just didn't get through the club picks. So I
Yeah.
had to have books outside of that I was reading.
I feel like we're very much on the same page there of I feel like 12 is a good minimum to have because a book a month is not that doesn't translate to that many pages a day. Uh,
No.
and 30 is a good stretch goal. I don't think I made it there last year either. I think I was at
I thought you were at like 33. I thought you
I
did
think
make
I think
it.
I did make it. Yeah, now that I said that I'm like, wait, I think I did hit 33 because I was like, wow, I didn't think I was going to do this.
But you
Yeah,
did.
but I counted a couple of well, you know what? Graphic novels count.
Yeah,
I'm
they
just
do.
they count.
I
So,
actually missed a graphic novel last year. I realized that the other day when I was looking at one of my friend's Goodreads, and she had read 2 mangas, and I
mm,
was like, I read a whole manga last year, and I didn't count it because I kind of just read it like a little bit here and there during a shift at work.
mm.
Like, because
Yeah.
it was one of those that was like, it wasn't like part of a series. Well, I think it's going to be series, but it was the first book, and it was more like comic book
Mm,
layout than like a big overarching story with like a lot of character development and that.
yeah.
But I never actually put it in my Goodreads, and I probably just won't get around to it, honestly.
Yeah. Well, but
So,
I feel like I do want to say that I count that as reading and
yes.
they might be a little bit shorter on the spectrum, but that's still reading.
But then like we read like 700-800 page books, and I feel like that evens out the page count or like the
Exactly.
word count.
If you finish Les Mis and you read a graphic novel, split the difference.
Yeah, honestly. I think that that is absolutely fair. And honestly, one of the books that I read last year was literally a children's, what is it called? A
Mystery.
novelization.
Oh.
Yeah, it was a novelization of Raya and the Last Dragon.
Hmm. Yeah.
And that's one of the books that I read. And I absolutely counted it because I was like, you know what? I don't even know if it was 100 pages long. And I was still like, nope, that counts. It's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if you got to like actual like 10-page children's books, maybe you're pushing it, but
Yeah,
anything above that.
I did see a lady last year who was like, it was getting close to the end of the year, and she was like, I just read Don't Let the Pigeon Ride the Bus 7 times to make my reading goal. And I was like, I feel like that's cheating.
Yeah, you're missing the point there. I mean, because
Yeah.
they're not designed for you. And I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not saying that to like be like you can't read kids books because you totally
Yeah.
can.
Yeah, I
Um,
do it all
but
the
especially
time.
the rereading part of it, it's like you couldn't even find 7 different books at least.
Yeah, like 7 different children's storybooks or whatever. Like,
Yeah, because that's
I don't
like
know.
that's like low effort cheating even.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like if you are genuinely reading children's books, then absolutely I would count them into my book
Yeah.
goal. I mean, I have 3
Hmm.
of the 4 books that I just read this year was a children's book trilogy. So, I absolutely enjoyed it. I did really
Especially
like it.
if you're interested in writing YA or for children, like
Yes.
valid
Yeah.
research.
Yeah, there's not a lot that I would consider quote unquote cheating for
Hmm.
like reading goals, but like that I feel like is kind of
Yeah,
cheating. Because
I
I think
dropped.
it's more because you're right. It's not in the spirit of like the point
Yeah,
of like why you set a reading goal. And I think you should just be like if you have a bad year, like
honest.
my friend, she set her goal last year to 100, but then towards the end of the year, she had a really like rough year. There was a lot of stuff going on in her personal life, and so she was having a lot of issues just like getting up to that goal. So she lowered it to 75 towards the end of the year.
Yeah.
And she felt kind of bad about it, but I was like, "No, I mean, it's your reading goal. If you make it, you make it. If you don't, you don't." That's why I set mine like sort of ridiculously low because
Hmm.
I know that I'm going to read more than 12 books in a year. But there might be a year that I don't read that many books,
Well,
you know, or I
we've
don't get up
talked
to that.
about before, I know on our blogs and stuff at least, that when we first got out of college, we didn't do that much reading.
Yeah, that's why we started book club a couple years ago was
Hmm.
so that we would be reading something. And
Yeah.
you know, and we had set our goal to 12 books a year essentially. Well,
Yep.
actually 11
Well,
because we knew
10.
that we would
Yeah, 10 or
yeah,
11.
because we knew that we would end up taking December off just because it's so busy.
Hmm.
And we still do that. I didn't read any books in November and December of last year. And
I
October was sketchy.
see. I had to read the Legend of Holly Claus because you can only read. Well, that this isn't true, but I felt like I wanted to read it around Christmas,
Yeah.
and it did. It worked perfectly with the vibe. It was. I finished that book like literally the day after Christmas, and was like that was satisfying. So
Oh, nice. Yeah. So that's my goal. My stretch goal is 30. 24 is probably the realistic part of it. I'm hoping that I do a couple more than that. I would really like to get to 30 books this year, but I don't want to set it as my goal because that makes me nervous. And I don't want to do that. I don't want
you're
to be overwhelmed.
you're off to a good start.
Yeah. Okay. So I had actually prepared a few questions, and that was one of them was how many books do you want to read? And then another question is, do you have the books picked out that you want to read in advance?
No, I have an enormous TBR shelf, so I probably own at least 100 books that I haven't read, which is more than I just stated my goal as. So obviously not going to get to all of them this year. But I basically just go to those, and I pick them off the shelf. I read a couple last year that I just picked up randomly from the library, but for the most part, it was all book club picks and then ones that I already own.
I keep a physical TBR list, which both of us really do that. I
Yeah,
don't read a ton digitally, and part of the reason for that, I just don't really like reading digitally as much. And
same.
also, I don't like having books that I can't see because out of sight, out of mind is way too true for me. And if
Yeah.
I had books just like piling up in like a Kindle or something, I would go crazy. Every time I open that, I would stop using it because I would find it too overwhelming.
Mhm.
So I have a shelf, and it has taken me a long time to work up to being able to have the self-control to not buy or constantly buy more books that look interesting or good. So one of my major goals this year is to really read from my shelf and to
Yeah.
not deviate from that as much. I mean, besides for book club for us, would deviate a little bit, but it won't be
See,
like that much.
I'm agreeing with you, and then I'm like, except I'm currently reading a book that someone lent to me. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So I have picked out several on my shelf. Since I've been listening to books, I do own the children's book trilogy. It's The City of Ghosts trilogy by Victoria Schwab, and I listen to it on audio, but I do own those books physically. And then I listen to Another Gospel by Elisa Childers, which I also own a physical copy of that. But I'm trying to just get through all my physical copies of books and
mm,
read them. And I've been trying to like only listen to audiobooks so far this year that are on my TBR. Like I don't
oh,
want to get caught up in trying books like on audio that I don't actually own, which has really limited the books that I can listen to. So
Yeah.
I'm currently listening to City of Bones by Cassandra Clare, and it's
Throwback.
yeah, I loved this trilogy. I listened to the first 3 books, and do not tell me that it's not a trilogy, because it 100% is. The first 3 books are a trilogy, the second 3 books are a trilogy. No one can convince me anything differently, and I only read the first 3 books. Fight about it in the comments. Whatever. But anyway, I read it in high school, and it was okay then. And I tried rereading it a couple years ago, and I could not reread it.
See, and I think I might have gotten to like the 3rd book or something, and I was pretty over it that first time reading through it, and so I've never gone back to them.
Yeah, I was really done by the end of the 3rd book. So I didn't go on. My little sister did. She read the next 2 books. I don't think that she actually has read the 6th book at all. I'm not sure if she did or not. But I was done after the first 3. But now I'm listening to it, so I started it, and I'm like, well, I guess I'll just listen to it on audio, since I would like to take advantage of audiobooks.
Yeah.
And kind of listen to them. But that sort of rolls into, do I have a lot of books picked out in advance? And I do. I have all of the books picked out for me and Charlotte to read for all of my club picks. So if Charlotte sticks us in a trilogy, it's really going to mess me up.
I'm not going to do that this year. Wait. Oh my gosh, I already decided to do that this year.
Charlotte!
I didn't. I haven't committed to the whole trilogy, but I did already pick out Inkheart.
Yeah, I know. I'm not gonna like be too upset about it, but like at the same time, I have picked out pretty much all the books. I tend to pick out books like in advance. So like I have been looking at my bookshelf off and on for the last few months, and I've been deciding like what books I want to do for me and Charlotte to read together, and I've been deciding which books I want to like prioritize to get done sooner rather than later. And then I have at least 2 books on my shelf right now that my friend also has copies of. And so we talked about reading those together too, as just kind of like just reading them at the same, like during the same month.
Yeah.
Just so then we were both like have it. And so yeah, I have a ton picked out.
You're so prepared.
Thank you.
That's like the moral of this episode. Corrie plans ahead. Charlotte is like, what do I feel like this month?
Yeah, I am not. I have friends who are very much emotion readers who will be reading like 3 or 4 books at a time, just because they'll just pick up whichever one they're like in the mood for.
Mm-hmm.
And I get that to some extent, but I'm definitely not that kind of person. I pick out the books that like I feel like reading at the time, and then I finish them. And that's it. I can't really read more than 3 books at a time.
Agreed.
That's too much. Like I surprised myself a couple years ago when I was in 2 book clubs and I could read 2 books at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I was pretty fine with that. I was still doing the thing. I'm a sprinter when it comes to reading, so I tend to just subconsciously prioritize a book that like I want to finish, whether that's good or bad, and then I just really like just race through it and just get it done with, and then move on to other books. But I surprised myself that I could go back and forth a little bit more in the last few years, and now I've had months where I'm reading like 3 books at the same time, and it hasn't been bad. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just different. I think it's nice to have more than one book going, so you can kind of rotate a little bit based on what you feel like reading at the moment. But I agree. I've never done more than 3, and I wouldn't really want to, because I feel like you just start getting confused, and like one of them ends up getting neglected, and it's just, unless maybe you're doing like a bunch of poetry books or something where it's not really a novel you're following. But
yeah, and it is kind of important for me, if I'm reading multiple books at the same time, they do have to be kind of different.
Yeah.
Like I don't typically want to be reading multiple YA books at the same time because they tend to be a little too similar.
Yep.
But If I have
And
like
same
a
with like,
nonfiction book and then like a fiction book that even if they're like similar time frames or whatever, I don't have as much of a problem distinguishing them. But it can get
yeah.
confusing over time.
And I would say that I don't like to read more than one fantasy book at the same time,
Mhm.
especially because there's so much world building happening that if you have more than one going, it can be like, wait, how does magic work in this one again? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, anytime you have to like stop and think about it, it's a little annoying.
Yeah. Yeah. So the only ones that I picked out in advance are I did pick Inkheart because I want to
Mhm.
revisit it. It's been a long
Mhm.
time.
I hope it's just as good as you remember it. I
I
have
hope it is.
I've made a lot of effort in the last few years to revisit books that I've read in the past, and it's a mixed bag.
Yeah, I was gonna say you've had some wins, and like the Bartimaeus trilogy held up great,
Mhm.
but was it Wake Fade Gone you read that you were like,
Yep,
eh.
I did not like that by the end of it. I still did like the first book in that trilogy, but it really sucked by the end, and I didn't remember anything about the third book, and I can see why now. But yeah,
Yeah,
there's, you know,
you know,
hit miss in between. I I do feel like a lot of revisiting is strictly hit or miss though, which is a
mhm.
little sad, and it makes it really hard to go back and revisit things now that I've done it a few times where I'm like, do I
You're like, I
want to
loved this.
yeah, do I want to just remember it as it was?
Do I want to judge myself in the past for loving this?
Yeah, which you do a
Um,
lot.
I do remember that I didn't like the third book in the Inkheart trilogy very much, so I'm gonna leave it totally up to you, honestly, on if we read more of them or not. Like, I'm not
Okay.
gonna commit to us reading in the trilogy. Vote in the comments if you feel like we need to read the whole trilogy, I guess. But
Yeah, let us
um,
know. And if we decide against your opinion, I'm sorry in
yeah.
advance.
And the only other book I had picked out was Papillion, however we're saying it.
Yeah.
Because I had already bought you a copy when we actually got to see each other in person.
Yes. Oh, and
So
you have a book that I had picked out as
yes.
well, which I'm nervous about that book now because I read another trilogy by the same author, and I bought that book when I had finished reading the first book in the trilogy because I loved that book so much.
Hmm.
And now I'm skeptical because I don't think that I'm going to be able to read the third book in this other trilogy
Oh no.
because I tried listening to it the other day and I was like I can't do this. It's so painful.
uh,
The second book was so bad and I'm just like I don't know if I can do this. Cannot
yeah.
crush my hopes and dreams. I'm thinking of just rereading the first book and then just getting rid of the second two books in the trilogy because I don't want it.
Yeah. I
But yeah,
haven't.
so we are a mixed bag on how prepared we are for
Yeah.
reading this year. I do think that I'm way more prepared this year than I have been in past years. Like, because usually I have a few books that I pick out in advance that I'm like, okay, I really want to get, these 3 to 6 books done. This is the first year that I have been like, I feel like I have almost every single book planned out. Now, obviously, like with the audiobooks, I don't have them 100% planned out because it just depends on what's available. But
Yeah.
other than that, as like a kind of mixed bag, I am really, really trying to stick to my shelves. Okay. Are you still there?
Yeah. You have one more
Why
question?
are you so good at being so silent?
Me?
Yes. I'll like break and I'll be like, did we get disconnected? It'll just be
No.
like dead. Just
I'm letting
dead air.
you lead.
Oh, I have 2 more questions.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Okay. Do you have any goals on the type of books that
Oh,
like not necessarily like having specific ones picked out, but
yes.
um more fiction, more nonfiction, more fantasy? Does that even matter?
So when I'm buying books, well, since we already said I'm going off my to be read shelf quite a bit, I have a very like varied taste, I would say. So like I didn't know that Papillion was nonfiction. That was a complete accident. So, but
Yeah.
I will say a friend of mine last year, she was doing a challenge for herself of trying to read things that took place on other continents. And I believe she found one for every continent, which I found fascinating because I was like, who even writes about like Antarctica? Like, what are these books? So I'm not going to go that far with it, but I would like to read some more because one of my favorite books that we ever have read in our book club, The Man Who Spoke Snakish,
Mm.
was translated out of I believe it's Estonian. Uh
Oh, okay.
yeah,
I didn't know
I would
that.
like to read more. You didn't know that?
No.
Yeah, it's a translation. So I would like to try to read a little bit more on other continents and less focused on the US, but and then I would say I feel like I have a good balance otherwise. There'll probably be a little more nonfiction in the mix, and I have a Stephen King book that I've been putting off reading for a long time, but I don't know if I'll get to it this year.
Stephen King writes 8,000-page books.
Yeah.
He writes too many words, in my humble opinion.
And I'm
But what do I
intimidated.
know?
I'm 100% intimidated, and I'll probably just continue carrying this book around the rest of my life. So, it's my albatross.
Honestly.
Yeah, that's my only real goal that I've come up with though, as far as other than that, fantasy, whatever. I see into I'm like fantasy. That's a completely different world, technically, but
Yeah. It always has a lot of aspects of our world, which is
yeah.
nice. You gotta have something to hold on to.
Mhm.
As far as me, I had originally said to myself, I was like, Self, you should read more nonfiction. And then I remembered that I don't like nonfiction for the most part. And I don't even really know how much nonfiction. How much nonfiction did we read last year? We read one.
Was it just one? I was gonna say it was either one or
No, I read more because I was doing research for church. So I read some books about the New Age teaching, and I read a memoir for that.
mm,
But we read, well, you read The Story of English,
mhm.
and that was the only nonfiction book
I think
that we
so,
read
yeah.
together. And I didn't even finish it. And that actually, like, because I'd been thinking about trying to read more nonfiction, and then that kind of like stopped me in my tracks. Like, do I want to? Because I could not get through this book at
Yeah.
all.
But that was more like nonfiction. I tend to pick out at least a couple of researchy type books for some reason, not for a specific purpose, but just because I like them.
Yeah. And I did not do well with that pick at all. But when we started reading Papillon, and I've been reading, well, I read Another Gospel, which is also nonfiction. I was like, it's not like I really hate nonfiction. It's just, it is a little bit harder to find
Good.
nonfiction books that are readable in like a specific way. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
especially quick reads in nonfiction. A lot of them tend to just be
Yeah.
slower reads. I think part of that is probably that we haven't picked many memoirs or biographies.
Yeah. Yeah, because
So,
definitely memoirs were way easier to get through. Like, I got through the one last year very quickly, and then I got through the one this year very quickly. But I remember the other nonfiction book that I read last year was very difficult to get through, and it was much less memoir, and it was more informational,
mm,
and it was just so dense. And I did get through 99% of it, so I did count it as being done, even though I don't think I read every single word in it, but I got it more for reference than anything
yeah.
else.
Yeah, because I read another nonfiction book that I picked for my other book club last year. So I actually
Yeah.
did pick two nonfiction books, but
hmm I
I didn't make
have,
you read them both.
yeah, I have multiple craft books on my shelf, like specifically writing ones that I would like to try to start reading writing books, at least one every year.
Mm,
And I think I would like to try to read a little bit more nonfiction. I have at least one on my shelf right now, and it's Brain on Fire,
oh yeah, that's a great
which,
one. I've read that.
yeah, I feel like I don't remember if you mentioned it to me or not, but I was like, "Oh, that sounds like it's very small and it seems
Yeah,
like it'd be a pretty quick read." And I was like, "You know what? I had the opportunity to get it for like pretty cheap, so I was like, why not?"
she
So I
was a
got it.
journalist, right?
I think so.
Yeah, I think I remember it being very readable, and I think it's partly because she is a journalist by trade.
But yeah, so I would like to try out a little bit more nonfiction this year. I'm saying that with some trepidation, but I feel like the ones that I have picked out and the ones that I've already read are going to be pretty easy to get through. I don't think they're going to be overly complicated or anything. Yeah. Otherwise, I want to say that I read a lot of varied genres, but I know that that's not true. Charlotte reads a lot of variety.
I was gonna say,
I don't.
every
And
time I'm like, Corrie, what about a historical fiction book? And you're like, why?
no. I just there are some things that I don't like, and they happen to encompass a lot of books.
A lot of things.
Okay? I'm not a fan of literary fiction. I
Hmm.
have discovered that over time because literary fiction is predominantly what they make you read in high school. And I 100% appreciate it way more now that I'm an adult, which
Hmm.
makes sense because literary fiction 99% of the time is written for adults, not for children. So I don't
Yeah.
know why they forced it upon us in high school. They should find something better. But I do read a decent amount of fantasy books or fantasy-esque because I tend to get intimidated with just straight up adult fantasy because it is so much work
Hmm.
to get through. But we did read Ruin of Kings last year, and I read To Kill a Kingdom, which was fantasy. Side is not really fantasy, it's more dystopian, utopian. So is
Kind of
Storm.
fantasy. I don't know.
I'm like staring at the books that I read last year, and I'm like, what was I reading? There is nothing that pulls these books together.
I told you about the weird link. I picked a lot of books last year that involved either Jewish authors or Jewish characters or both.
Yeah, you did mention that.
But that was completely accidental, so I don't
Hmm.
I wasn't intentionally doing that. I was just but I did enjoy it. I got a lot of different perspectives on Jewish culture, so
Yeah, I really did like The Golem and the Genie and Gentlemen of the Road, which both
yeah.
have a lot of Jewish influence in them. And I did really like both of those. I'm seeing a lot of kids fiction in
Mm.
mine, or like books that were like borderline, because we read Along the Indigo and House of Ash, and both of those were like sort of kids fiction and sort of
Yeah.
not at the same time. And it was really hard to like place them. I read a
Yeah,
lot of
they're both
crappy
good.
books last year.
Mhm.
I feel like I wasted my time. I did not like so many of these books.
Yeah, last year was a little rough for me too. I was like
Oh,
loving these.
I did not realize how many books I read that I really didn't like. But I mean, I guess it makes sense. I thought I was just being like my mean old harsh self, but my average Goodreads rating for last year was 2.7 stars.
Very low.
It is very low. I mean, I try to like start at a 3-star rating and go from there, but like obviously I had a lot of lower ones to average that out. But man, yeah, no, I read the best American mystery stories and I hated it. I hated From Blood and Ash. I hated Watching You by Lisa Jewell.
Hmm.
Did not like Raya and the Last Dragon.
None of
It's
these are
just
books we read
not my
together, which is funny.
Yeah, didn't like Fade or Gone. I did actually really like Cold Storage, and I actually kept it on my shelf.
Yeah.
I don't know if I told you this, but
No,
I
you
kept
kept
it.
it, huh?
Yeah, I decided not to get rid of it. I was like, I could see myself picking this up again some
It
point.
was a fun read.
It was. It was really good.
Check out that
Uh,
episode, guys.
yeah. No, for real. We both really enjoyed that
Yeah.
book. I mean, I don't remember if I ended up upping my star rating. No, I left it at 3. But I actually thought later about upping it to 4 stars because I did genuinely enjoy it.
Hmm.
I think if I reread it, I would consider rating it 4 stars at that point. Sorry, I didn't mean to like start reminiscing about all the crappy books that I read this last year.
Yeah, what's your last question for me, Corey?
Is there a book habit that you want to change or break in 2022?
Well, you're kind of helping me with one of them, which I had complained to you about,
Mm-hmm.
is that I bring books back and forth from home to work a lot because I tend to read very slow and steady, so I read like every day. And I have been beating up the books essentially, and I didn't want to do that so much. So Corey got me a book sleeve, uh,
Yeah.
which I had never heard of as a thing that existed. So I'm excited to check that out. Just got it in the mail this weekend, actually. So yeah, I like to protect my books a little bit more. And other habits, I think I want to try actually like setting aside more time for reading as well. Like I tend to read during meals is kind of what I've been doing, which doesn't
Mm-hmm.
help with the beating up books part.
Yeah.
But also like you're not entirely focused on the book, and I really would like to do that.
Nice. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about wanting to set more time aside for reading,
Hmm.
but yeah, I actually do. I was kind of thinking about that the other day because I tend to read. I work at a bookstore currently, and we tend to have a decent amount of downtime. So we do read there, and that is honestly predominantly where I get most of my reading done. That and listening to books in the car. So, but as soon as it starts getting busy, or like that means that I basically don't read on the weekends because we have customers to take care of, or like if there is tasking during the week, like if we have to reset tables or reset sections and move things around, then I just don't read
Yeah.
because I don't set aside time outside of that to
Yep.
like actually read, because I guess I see it as reading is so much of an afterthought, I guess, that I
Hmm.
just kind of like fit it into places instead of like making time for it.
Yeah.
So,
But
yeah, no,
every time,
I would definitely want that as well. Can see
yeah,
myself wanting that.
yeah, every time I've actually done it, every time I've sat down and like just read on the couch, I've been like, wow, I really enjoyed that.
Mhm. Yeah, and
And
it's nice because you don't have anything like interrupting you and you
mm,
don't have a time limit per se. I've thought about trying to read before bed, but I've had bad experiences with that before.
yeah, me too.
Like either not getting to a good stopping point and reading too long, or if the book is a little bit darker. I don't like tend to have nightmares or anything, but I do tend to like overthink.
Hmm.
So it doesn't help me to wind down for the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah, I'd say it's better just sitting on the couch in like the afternoon and reading some. And I found that like about half an hour is actually long enough for me to feel like I made decent progress and I'm still just solely focused on the book, which is nice.
Mhm. That is probably a decent amount of time. I should start doing that.
Let's
I
see
have
what
such a variable work schedule too though, and so it does make it hard to like have like anything be just like regular.
yeah. We'll have to
Um
come back to this at the end of the year and be like, did we actually do this?
yeah, if I remember to like write this down or like re-listen to this at
Yeah.
like the end of the year. I don't know if I will or not, but maybe you will have to make that your New Year resolution to listen to this again.
Remind us, yeah, what we
Yeah.
said.
Well, for my book habit that I want to change or break in 2022, I wrote a couple down, and one of them was I want to read from my shelves,
Hmm.
but I already talked about that. But I want to start taking notes in my books more. So actually, the ironic thing is that you want to stop damaging your books, and I would like to start.
But you're bringing them
I
up in a positive way for a reason.
Yeah, and I am able to just like use sticky notes a lot, which is nice. I kind of want to see if I can get some of the clear sticky notes that I've seen people using, because then you can underline without. I hate writing in books. Like I
Mm-hmm.
hate putting permanent indelible ink in books,
Me
like
too.
regardless. So I do tend to use a lot of sticky notes. I was looking at my books the other day and I decided to gift a book that was in really good condition to one of my friends. And so I was like, oh, I should probably like flip through this because I was actually wrapping it for her. And I was like, did I write in this book at all? Because last year I I had a really weird relationship with writing in books. Occasionally I would do it, but I never did it like a ton. And I've always had, I mean, I hate it, but I also have mixed feelings about it.
Yeah.
Does that even make sense?
Yeah, it does. Because, I mean,
I
there is
don't,
a reason to do it.
yeah. So I was flipping through it and I pulled out like 30 sticky notes that I had written. And I was like, it's a good thing I like flipped through this book for 2 seconds before I like wrapped it up and gave it to her. Because it still looks like it's in pretty new condition. It's not like beat up or
She
anything.
probably just would have laughed.
She probably would have, because I was pretty angry at some of those sticky notes. But it was a book that I had written an analysis for, and that was the book. I don't remember if I mentioned it in a podcast sometime last year, but I wrote a 4,000 word analysis on that book that I forgot about. I forgot
You
that I wrote
purged in that
4,000 words. I did that twice last year, and I do not regret it even a little bit that I wrote those analyses. And I remembered how much I enjoyed writing them, but they are also a lot of work. So I would like to write more analysis this year, and I would like to be able to post it on my blog. But in order to do the analysis, I run into this a lot where I start reading a book and I'm like, oh, this would be a really good book to write like a long blog post about, even if it's not like a full analysis of it. It's like a really detailed review. And then I think, well, in order to do that, I have to start taking notes. And I don't feel like taking notes, so I don't. And then I get to the end of the book and I'm like, well, I want to write an analysis on it. And then it's like, I'm not going to read this book again. I'm not going to do it.
A vicious cycle.
Yeah, so this year I would like to make significantly more effort to just have sticky notes. I have sticky notes around me all the time. I have like 5 packages of them on my desk. They're always available to me at work because we use them constantly. And I feel
You just
like,
need to actually use them.
yes. And once I start using them, I know that I get into a rhythm and they're pretty easy to continue using. But I would like to do that for at least a few books this year, cuz I did that twice last year and I did them within like 2 months of each other where I wrote thousands of words on 2 completely different books. And then I forgot.
And then
that I did
just, yeah. I literally think you purged it. You just were like,
Yeah.
here's all of it.
Bye. Just walk away. It's fine. So that's my habit that I would like to do more. I don't know if I will make the effort to start taking notes in all of my books, or if just when I come across a book that I get a little bit into and I'm like, okay, I would like to write an analysis on this.
Yeah.
And then start taking notes. So I don't know if this will actually result in that many more long book reviews, but I hope it will. I guess I could make an effort. But usually I have to like really decide on a book. I don't decide before I start reading the book. I decide once I'm a little bit into it. Then I'm like, "Oh, I would like to write about this."
Yeah. You need to know that there's something to write about.
Yes.
Cool. Did you come up with an outro?
No. Came up with a good intro though, I suppose.
You did.
It's fine.
It'll do.
Hopefully it'll be more comfortable over time.
Yeah. How do we want to end then?
Do you have any book goals or questions? Did you come up with any questions
Did
or
I?
thoughts or overall anything? Or do I do all the work?
No, you did all the work for this one. You said you were going to do it, so I let you do
I
it.
know.
And also, we've been talking for like 50 minutes, so.
I know. Because once you get me started, I can't stop. I tried to convince Charlotte to not record today because I was really tired, and that has not been remedied. However, once I get started talking about books,
That's why I was like, we can just do it.
Yeah, I was like, I don't shut up, so.
Here you go. Here's my rambling.
Yeah, well, it is literary ramblings.
It is.
Well, let us know if you made it this far into our podcast. If you did, you're automatically our number 1 fan because I'm pretty sure I'm the only one who's listened to a podcast all the way through. Like, ever.
What do we need to do? Pay someone?
I don't know. But thank you, number one fan, for
Yeah,
listening
thank
to
you.
us. And we really appreciate it. Next month, we'll have a podcast about Papillon. And that should be pretty interesting and pretty fun. And then we are going to try to do a couple just like random podcasts throughout the year like this, where we talk about some more general things about reading and or writing. We are literary ramblers, so just kind of whatever strikes our fancy.
Yeah. Or if you guys do end up commenting anything, we'll run with it.
Don't make that promise.
Okay, initially, now, you have to comment within a month of this posting.
Oh my gosh, wow. Nobody's gonna make it.
That's the
I'm
point.
gonna get on. I'm gonna comment.
Oh no.
I'm gonna make my demands.
Wow, another Corrie run episode. I see how it is.
Yes. Yes. Well, one of these days you're gonna have to run an episode.
Okay.
Be a good time. Or you do. I don't know. You don't have to. I don't want to scare Charlotte away.
I mean, I think I kind of run the ones where I put the book.
Yeah, you do. You usually know so much more about it too. Just because I don't do any research.
I love research. That's what it is. I'm like, what is this in the author's bio? Fascinating.
Yeah. And I'm like, the author has a bio, and you're like, yeah, it was literally like part of the book. I'm like, I skipped that part.
That's why we make a great team.
Oh, yeah, for sure. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening. Like, comment, subscribe. We had so many times that you could comment, and we asked you to. Just any of those times are perfect. And if you have anything that you want to see us doing this year in 2022, let us know. And that's the end of the show.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, happy New Year, guys. Bye.
Bye.